Everyone. First of all, a big round of applause for CSR Box for bringing a very gender diverse panel, or I should say, it's so usually we are very bored seeing all men up there, but now I am the only one here, and I think I have. So so that's good. So first things first, you had a wonderful power pack today, workshop sessions, so many jargons you must have heard today and yesterday. So today what we want to do is, in simple terms or without using any jargons, we want to kind of summarize everything that happened over the 2 days, because everything starts from a partnership, right? So whether you talk about climate change, you talk about systems change, you talk about leveraging government schemes, everything starts with a solid partnership. So we'll quickly start with few questions, and I will request all the panelists to keep it very crisp and more like in a very simple language, so that all the NGOs coming from across the country at a different growth stage, they can also understand and they can also learn from some of the successful models that have worked. And after that, we'll come to the audience to ask questions. So keep your questions very relevant, very simple, and stick to the timelines, because we'll give a minute to everyone to ask a question, and quickly the panelists will give responses. So the more crisp your question is, the more crisp the answer should be, and that way we can have many more questions. So quickly we'll ask Anushri, um, what is some of what are some of the few partnerships that Adhyan Foundation has been able to form or establish with some of their top donors or some of their top partners, and what are 2 3 things that have worked for her as an individual and also as a NGO, that how she has navigated right from meeting someone for the first time to actually forging a very solid partnership which has worked for their organization.
Um, am I audible? Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you all for staying for the last panel. I think that's like an act of courage. So you all need to be congratulated. I think for me, the partnerships with CSR organizations that have really worked, at the beginning, it's really about relevance. Like, is there a sense of a relevant fit for both? And is there a sense of shared value? Often, I think as NGOs, we feel like, oh, we're getting money, so that's them giving value, what do we add? But if both sides equally feel their shared value and the CSR partner also feels like, what you're doing is genuinely something they want to do and change and solve for, I think that's the starting point. That has to really click. And I think what's worked in partnerships that have sustained and lasted, because with CSR partnerships, often sometimes people are able to sign up only for 1 year with you, but the ones that keep going with you, I think what's really worked is a very honest sense of what's happening on both ends, because often I think Aman is one of our partners, and he's always been very honest about what are the pressures they operate under, so that you know that this is what's happening on their end. So how do you articulate your impact or articulate what's happening in a way that somebody can explain to their board or to whoever, or their auditors or whoever is asking. And similarly on our end, to be able to say, if we work with government or work under certain pressures, what's happening for us? Why are things deviating? Where do we need you to come and pull your weight? Maybe you have, government partnerships where you can come in and bring in some influence where things are getting derailed. So I think that sense of honesty has really been something that's really helped. And the second thing is really like where people have felt invested in us as an organization, not just in the program, where they gradually start feeling like, oh, I'm part of your growth journey, and we also make the effort to make them part of our growth journey. I think those are the partnerships that have been the most helpful for us.
So I think Anushri and Adhyan Foundation are doing a fantastic job for us personally. So what Anushri mentioned, one is honesty, that whatever you are kind of pitching or whatever you are implementing, you have to be honest about it and share your challenges as it happens, not after a month or not after things have gone out of control. So this is one thing that can be a key takeaway for all the NGOs. So now coming to Shilpa, Shilpa, what has been one of or few of the partnerships that you have seen grow since you have been for a very long time at your organization, and why those partnerships were able to grow to becoming one of the solid partnerships? So what are some of your perspectives or some of your points that you see that why that partnership has worked?
Hi, everyone. Good evening. So I think I'm very happy to see this session because it is talking about CSR NGO partnership. I think we have evolved from a stage where it was funder-donor relationship to a partnership, and both NGO and CSR are part of it. So that makes me very happy because it's not only one-sided, it's both-sided. So I think that's a commendable job that CSR Box has done, because changing the analogy is very important. So it's a partnership we are talking about, and it's not a marriage. It's a professional relationship we are talking about, right? When people think partnership, people think marriage, and marriage is completely, it's based out of love, it's based off of many other things, but this is a professional relationship we are talking about. There are expectations from both the sides. And I would recommend all the NGOs to have that expectations, like the CSR have that expectation. So you should also have that expectation from us, and we should also have that expectation, which is completely right, because obviously it's a partnership. Second is, it is very important when we are doing this partnership, we want a value out of it, right? And if that value comes out, it is a sustainable partnership, it is a long-term partnership. If the value doesn't come out, it is not a long-term partnership. So whenever I look for a project, I always look for the partner who are approachable. That is very important for me. Approachable, when I say all of you are approachable, but I think adaptability would be the right term. Because see, CSR space is evolving in corporate world. No matter how much 10 years ho gaye, the 15 saal ho gaye, but still the board is not evolved that much. The jargons are not so known to the sector, right? So there is lot of things which come, like she was saying, Aman keeps telling ki ye chahiye, hame wo chahiye, last minute demands which will come, last minute changes which will happen. So we see that adaptability is there in that NGO, whether they can help us in making our program more impactful, and as per our need can adapt to the changes when and wherever required. So that rigidity should not be there. And for me, the core is always the beneficiaries, the stakeholders. If the NGO doesn't believe in that and doesn't bring that while the discussion is happening. So I was telling Aman that whenever a fundraiser talks to me, I always prefer talking to the program team, because they know the program. The fundraiser talks only about the fund and compliance. So I want to understand the partnership. I want to understand the stakeholders, how the community will be impacted. So that is how the partnership becomes more sustainable and long-term. We do look for long-term partnership, but we also test it. So we do short-term projects and then go for long-term projects. Sometimes we do long-term partnership, but we always put a clause that it can be withdrawn if their partnership doesn't work. So to start with, that is something which I look for. Yeah, and I'll keep it very crisp, but there's a lot to say about it, but yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Shilpa. So I think what she mentioned, I would also like to resonate with that. When someone is talking about high funda models, high funda solutions, at the end of the day, we want to know the end beneficiary, which is at the village level, how you are going to influence or impact his or her life. So every pitch, every conversation should revolve around how you would kind of create impact, not just the word impact, but also the real impact in the lives of the beneficiaries. And second, how she spoke about that she wants to talk with the actual team that implements it. So there is a kind of, we don't mean to offend any of the fundraisers here, but we would also want the fundraisers to accompany the program team. So they are the real experts. So sometimes even at our internal meetings, there are certain questions which I am not able to answer. So I would call the fundraiser, then the fundraiser will call the program team, and usually it takes a lot of time. So it's always important that the actual team or the fundraiser both are together, and then that's how you should pitch. So that makes the job of the funder or the donor easier, and there is a quick turnaround time. So I think these 2 points are very crucial. Now we'll go to Sneha, because she works at the intersection of both NGOs as well as donors, and she would be able to validate some of the points that our NGO partner and one of the donor had mentioned. So Sneha, what are some of the key takeaways for the audience today from what the NGO said and what the donor said, whether they are speaking truth, or whether you see there is some kind of sugar coating, or what are some additional points you would like to mention, some of the partnerships that your NGOs whom you are doing capacity building are able to establish some solid partnerships with some of the top corporates.
So I'll try to add to what's already been shared, and I'll give a perspective over a little bit of a life cycle, right? So there is something to be said about what makes partnerships work right at the start, right? So when you are pitching to a donor as a nonprofit, or when you're looking for a nonprofit as a donor, I think over there, a research-based understanding of your mandates is really important. And we oftentimes see that nonprofits don't invest that time and energy in understanding what does this corporate do, what are their areas of focus, what are they not going to fund and support. And we work with a lot of nonprofits, and with a complete understanding of their challenges in being able to identify the right donors. Our role is to enable them and capacitate them to take a slightly more diligent and research-based approach to seeking partners, even at that first stage, right? So are you going onto the website, reading, understanding, figuring out where your work fits into their work? Because as Shilpa was saying, it's two ways. It's not going to just work one way. So I think that's at the start. If I talk about, say you convert a donor and you're working with a CSR donor as a nonprofit, oftentimes one of the big gaps we've seen once the conversion has happened is an immediate drop in commitment and communication from nonprofits. And I think it gives a bad rap to the way NGOs function, and this narrative that you're not professional. I think somewhere over there it's upon us to also reflect as NGOs, and we ourselves are a nonprofit, that how diligently do we maintain that communication? How the value of integrity, right? That you said you would do this. Am I doing that? Am I checking on it on a quarterly basis? Am I reporting and communicating it in the right manner? That responsibility is ours. It's not the donors to kind of ask and request and things like that. So I think, and keeping impact at the center of that communication, of course. So how do you maintain that relationship once you've converted a donor? And I also want to call out that, cases where partnerships fail are many. And if I reflect back on our own experience, I think if we've not been able to do this engagement well during that period of the grant, that's one case. But oftentimes there's a natural fallout as well. And I think it's important to acknowledge and accept that with a certain amount of humility, that, the shared purpose for which the partnership was there no longer exists. So either the context has changed, the geography has changed, the focus has changed, maybe your programs have evolved, so change is inevitable. So I think having that lens that partnerships will come to a logical endpoint, and so how do you constantly build your muscle as a nonprofit to engage newer and newer partners is also just a humbling perspective that I think nonprofits need to build in as well.
Next question to Tanu. Her name is very difficult to pronounce, so she told me I can call her Tanu. So Tanu, when someone approaches you as a non-profit, what are some of the points that you'll kind of filter from the conversation, and how those points help you to forge that partnership with the NGO? Can you throw some light on that?
Thank you, Aman, for the question, and wonderful audience. Let me come to the crux of what makes it work when a corporate actually looks into a proposal which is usually shared by a not-for-profit. A lot of it has been covered in the panel, but I would want to reiterate that understanding the objective of the corporate, aligning it with the organization's projects and programs, and to get deeper understanding of what exactly. I mean, I'm not talking about, for example, you select education as a large landscape, but what exactly in education? I can talk about the organization that I'm representing, GenPact. When we talk about education, we specifically try and focus on women education, women in STEM. We look into skilling, we look into employability, but pertaining to women. So understanding and that intersectionality, that common overlap of both the organizations to say that this is the perfect match, and therefore have those exploratory conversations before reaching out with a bombastic proposal note to say that this is what we have been doing, we've been creating X number of impact on ground, and therefore we would want to go ahead and forge a partnership. I think that basic alignment is a must. Calling out the true challenges, and not every time a story has to be very successful, but the real on-ground challenges while designing your programs, projects that you have faced, and therefore what is the evolution as an organization that you have had. What are those learnings basis which you have evolved in your program? Even that is important. Of course, impact is important. You definitely showcase your impact because that is what draws the eyeballs of the funder. And yeah, that's about it. And when you're making your pitch, I think how trustworthy, how convincingly are you actually showcasing your work on ground, and how earnestly have you been invested? I think these are some of the softer and the overarching aspects that we as corporates, we look at while considering a proposal. Also, just to add on, you know, when you are actually representing your proposal to the funder, it is important, as has been reiterated in this panel, that you carry somebody from the program team. It's not necessary that, you know, it's the fundraiser or it's the top management of the not-for-profit who goes ahead and pitches. It's important of that grassroots level implementing individual who's part of your program to come and talk about what is exactly happening on ground. What have you been able to drive? What is that unit change that you've been able to drive in this due course of program implementation? We love to listen to this part of the story. Trust me, we often do not get it, but we really look forward. We don't look forward to a boardroom level presentation, but we look forward to the real stories on ground, what is happening. That makes, that is actually a key differentiator. Let me be very honest to you.
Thank you, Tanu. So I think a lot of people have approached us over the past 2 days. I think some of us have run out of our cards, more than 200 cards have been exchanged. But there are many small talks. So what Tanu iterated is very important, that you should do your research, at least secondary research, by reading her annual report, that what is her company investing in, right? And then you approach, because if you are meeting 100 people and you have very limited time, rather than that, you should only interact with 10 donors who are actually working in the same field as you are. And that also kind of forms a very solid impression that, okay, they have done their homework. Otherwise, I was just in the loop before coming here and somebody is talking to me, hi, you have an RFP live. That's a skilling RFP, and the person is working in education. So there is no need for a small talk. He can or she can talk about a very solid opinion about skilling if they are not working in skilling, or how education is contributing towards the need for skilling. Maybe our education institutes are not doing great, or maybe the new education policy is emphasizing on skilling, something like that he or she can talk about. So I think as donors, we want to also talk about something very intellectual, not just small talks, and that usually stands out. So I will go now to Poonam. What are some of the deal breakers? Usually when the NGO submits a proposal or approaches you or meets you at such events, so apart from what the panelists have already covered, what are some of the deal breakers that usually is a big turnoff for an organization? Okay, we don't want to work with someone like that. Or what can be some of the issues that you identify in the NGOs during your conversation at an initial stage that usually leads to a deal failure?
Thank you, Aman, and first of all, thank you, CSR Box, for this opportunity, and to all of you for staying back. It's quite late. I would not say turn off, but with my experiences, I think 3 fundamental things which have helped evolving a partnership, and it's on the both sides. It needs a thorough understanding, research about each other. And when I'm talking of thorough understanding research, I'm also talking about how the values, philosophy, and purpose align to each other, because that's very, very important. So a lot of understanding of the organizations one is approaching is needed. What's the interest area? What's the call and the purpose of the organization? So that's one. 2, obviously, you know, if the sector or thematic area, the expertise needed for that is like, this is not a rocket science to tell, but that's extremely important. And 3rd, transparency is, and on the both sides, transparency really matters. I have experienced some of the cases wherein I mean, we have to see that, either of the parties have to see that they are the experts of their sector and you are the experts of evaluating things. As much as transparent we are with each other, there are chances to have a further communication and further progress on the conversations. Having said that, three things, but it's also very important for both the sides for a partnership to grow. Both of them are really interested to build capacities of each other, and maybe corporates have to play a better role. Here again, coming back, again, it's a matter of transparency, that am I transparent to tell that where I need the support? And the corporate also has to understand that what is their strength is their strength, but what I can bring. And it needs an investment of time. It needs an investment, which sometimes we are so busy, it takes a back seat. But in my experiences, whatever investments we have done, thinking together about a problem, understanding, what are the gaps, and then together making a plan. So willingness to, on both the sides helps. And to the capacity building, I would say that, and it's not for my project only, once the capacities are built, the NGOs or the partners, they can use those skills or those competency sets for other projects also. So it's not that relationship should not end ever. Even if your project gets completed, the relationship must continue. I mean, I must have worked with some partners for 2 years or 4 years, but I'm still in touch with them. They are still in touch with me, and I know what's the progress going on. So this ecosystem has a lot of passionate people. Everyone wants to do something good. People take references. So, and on top of mind, sometimes there are references who are in touch with you, who that they're doing good job. So those are some of the things I think I would suggest if someone has to approach, and from the corporate side also suggest to think through aligning before the partnership and then investing in capacity building. Thank you.
Very valid points. So when we meet a lot of NGOs, usually we don't even remember the names, right? Because we meet so many people. So what she mentioned, that transparency is one of the key area for her to look after when she is evaluating a proposal. So I will quickly ask Anushri again, that as an NGO, how does she communicate that her organization is a very transparent organization? What are some of the key words, terminologies, documents, due diligence processes, or the highlights she can give to a donor to establish that they are a very transparent organization and the donor can trust them? So trust and transparency both goes hand in hand. So how do we establish trust and transparency?
So I think trust is a tough word, right? I think there's basic hygiene. Hygiene is, do you have all your certifications in place, your financial compliances? So compliances being in place is hygiene, and that's the first part of trust. I think from there it goes on to things that can feel a little more intangible, right? Like, I think when we try to signal trust, and this might just be I'm from the not-for-profit perspective, and it'll be useful to hear everybody on the panel talk about it, but like, we then will say who has funded us before, what award somebody has got, what have we done in the past that makes us credible. I hate talking about where I studied, but when I feel like I have to build credibility, I'll be like, oh, I got my degree from here, and this is what I do. Because I know in some rooms that matters. Like when I say that, they'll say, oh, okay, and that's when they're listening to me. But I also feel like trust is sometimes fuzzy in the sense that we're all human, right? And humans trust other humans, and sometimes to get somebody to trust you, you have to know somebody who knows them. And that's not always easy. Sometimes you need an introduction to a donor because somebody they trust is vouching for you, and that can be a little hard. And sometimes I also find that trust is about relatability. I'm a young woman, and very often I'm pitching to much older men. I may not always be relatable to them. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. And I feel like some of those things are very tangible, some of those things are intangible, and it's about like who you might click with. So I think I have answers to some of it, and some of it I really don't know why people trust us, and sometimes maybe they just think you're shady. Like, I don't know why. So I think the basic hygiene things are things you can take care of. And then there's the human element that maybe others can unpack and decode. Yeah.
So we'll go to the donor side, that what are some of the signals they catch from the conversation, that when an NGO is presenting to them or meeting them for the first time, or they are at an advanced stage of partnership. So what are those signals that you pick? Like, one of the signals I pick is usually someone talk about how great they are, what is their turnover, what is their numbers, what is their reach. But the moment they mention that we are audited by XYZ person, or we have a third party report which says that our work is impactful, so it usually clicks, okay, I can go through that report. Otherwise, we meet 100 people and we don't want to risk our jobs, that because we are, as part of our job only, we are making a grant, and if that goes bad, then there is a penalty also. So the donor side will relate to me. So what are those signals?
See, I would say there is no one solution to it. So I'll give you an example. I'm here since morning. I've met 100 of organizations, right? There are three categories I would divide this whole conversation into. One was people who came and did a conversation with me. They asked about me, they are told about themselves. Second one was who did give me information. Just da 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 da. Third one was who gave and just introduced, अपना कार्ड दे दीजिए, मेरा कार्ड ले लीजिए, मैं आपको कर लूँगी. Ask me from all this, there are only one or two which clicked to me, and they clicked because they talked about something which aligned to what I wanted to do, right? So I'll say not one, two type of people clicked to me. One was one who what I wanted to do, and I could see, oh wow, this is a solution I can see. Second is one which was innovation, because that is something I want to do, right? So I wouldn't say there's a fixed formula that this will work, this won't work. All organizations, all corporates are different, and there's no strategy to it. So as an organization, what everyone is saying, even trust has a different definition for everyone. Like she's saying basic hygiene is a trust for her. Basic hygiene is a necessity, it's not trust, right? That all of you have to have, right? It's not building the trust. That is the basic component which needs to happen. Trust starts beyond that, right? Trust is something, for me, trust is, I think that conversation happens where I can connect to that person. I can see as a company, I will get some social credibility for what I'm investing into. So for me, that is trust, right? If I don't see that, that conversation doesn't happen beyond that. And so as an organization, when you're reaching, so understand one more thing, because most of the organization comes to me and say, ma'am, हमने आपको 4 बार reach किया, आप नहीं कर रहे हो, वापस revert. For us, it is not possible. So it's okay. I won't say don't do it, because I understand, because I was on the other side of the table. I understand that's an ecosystem you have to survive and you have to do. It's a difficult space to be in, right? But we also have some limitations. We cannot reach out to someone. But when I need a partner, I reach out to all my mails. I check all my mails कि कौन सा वो partner है जो click करेगा. Suppose I want to work in education. I go through. So I recently, yesterday only, I have developed a form. And we have come with a QR code. My team is giving that QR code to all the NGOs. Please give that. Please register yourself in that so our database can be developed. So when now I want to work in education, I know these are the 10 partners I have met over here, and I can reach out to them and have that first round of conversation. Out of that 10, maybe 1 or 2 might click to us, because a lot of alignment needs to happen, which is our location, which is what we want. Third is adaptability. For me, adaptability is very important, because you people think that corporates are professional, but in CSR space, we are not professionals. We are still evolving. There are a lot of things keep changing every day. Requirements change, our formats change, our lot of time, MOUs, there are a lot of addendums which happens in the MOU. So that adaptability should be there. So for me, these are the few components which do matters when I look for a partnership. And this is how I navigate around partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Tanu, your take on that?
Trust. I think trust as a word is huge. And I don't want to comment on trust, Aman, very frankly, because it is perception-based. At the face of it, it can be something. But what actually resonates, I think I have spoken about it in my first portion of the, while I express my thoughts. Something is hygiene. I completely resonate with Shilpa. Having your documents in place is hygiene. That actually makes you a qualifier to be a part of that ecosystem in the first place. But what is a key differentiator for me, what brings in that X factor is something like how consistently, how persistently have you been driving, how passionately, how have you been driving your work on ground. What are some of the big initiatives, big ticket items that you've been able to tick off in your list in terms of commitment that you have signed up against some of your donors, your past projects, your ongoing projects? What is the future vision of your organization? And again, resonating back to Shilpa, I think agility and adaptability is something which the CSRs at corporates too are undergoing at this point in time. Tomorrow there can be some specific requirement of the board. We had COVID. A lot of the organizations, a lot of corporates were heavily invested in education. Health was seldom a priority for us, but when COVID came, we saw the mass, kind of injection of budgets into health-related programs, isn't it? We ran those programs for a period of 3 to 4 years, and gradually we're coming back to and looking into other avenues of, therefore, education, livelihood, skilling, women empowerment, etc., etc., etc. So that agility factor, that adaptability factor, CSR space in corporates is still undergoing a massive change. So that openness to be flexible, openness to, and when I talk about flexibility, it's not only about the donor, it is also about the NGOs. I think it's a mutual correlation and exclusive relationship that we are talking about. How convincingly you're able to showcase your story, your narrative, all of that definitely builds up when we are evaluating long-term partnerships. And to be very upfront, we see value in long-term relationships, at least 2 to 3 years of engagement, followed by a very, very rigorous monitoring and evaluation system of 3 years. That is where we see value.
Thank you, Tanu. So what I hear is basic minimum hygiene is required. That's like an eligibility criteria. But a winning criteria would be a very solid track record, which can be built through showing some examples of your past successful projects, how you were agile in some of the cases like during the COVID wave, or how you adapted to a new problem on ground and how you devised a solution. So I think this can be built in the pitch that you do to the donors. I think we have very short time, so I will quickly finish 2 questions, one to Poonam and then one to Sneha, and then we'll come back to the audience. So Poonam, what are some of your pain points when you are kind of evaluating multiple proposals, and how do you select one or two? And when everybody is competing for the same grant or for the same theme, so what are those 2-3 organizations and why they win the grant? So quickly, can you tell the audience?
Pain point is that, a couple of organizations are doing great job, but you have to select one. So that's a pain point. But, okay, so maybe I'll relate it to, again, the being authentic is very, very important. Being authentic would mean sometimes when we receive proposals or when sometimes NGOs approach, they go beyond their core strength just to, that project requires this information. Yes, we will do this. Project requires this, but it doesn't help. You may be willing to do something which project requires, but you also have to give a confidence that this is my core, how I can bring difference. I don't know this right now, but I'm really willing to maybe, do this part also. Being authentic is extremely important. And I would also say, we're talking of trust. As corporates, have you created the environment wherein NGO comes back and says, hey, we don't know this, we are here. So both things are equally important. I think we talked on, fundamentals of hygiene, and then like your expertise, your references, your everything. And one thing which definitely works for us is being authentic and the alignment of the purpose together.
Thank you, Poonam. And for us, we also take donor feedbacks. So if suppose Poonam and Shilpa are two of your donors, will call them and also take in writing what is their feedback on you. So while you get the partnership, you get the grant, so that's not the end of the story. I think that's the beginning of your story, and you have to build it like a mission, not like a project, because project always ends. And the mission, if you kind of align with organizations like some of the panelists representing here, so then it can be into a long-term mission, and then you can have a multi-year grant. So usually most of the donors prefer 1 year grant, but now slowly we are seeing a lot of donors coming forward with a long-term grants up to 3 years, and maybe in the future we'll see even beyond 3 years we'll have some kind of MOU formats. So coming back to Sneha, we have so many organizations who are on the donor side, and then we have hundreds of NGOs on the receiving side. But what is stopping the matchmaking? I think organizations like Atma can play a crucial role because they understand both the sides. What do we want and what does the NGO want, and how Atma or how capacity building or how kind of stepping up our games can solve the challenge at the ground. Sneha.
Thanks, Aman. So I'm going to take what is an intermediary perspective, right? And we have the privilege of working with both sides of this topic and this partnership that we're talking about. To me, I think what is really a need of the hour are open, respectful, democratic platforms for dialogue. Okay, so I'm going to actually say that something like this needs to happen much, much more often. I think everyone, is trying to do their best. See, there are times we work with about 500 organizations a year. Many of them are small grassroots NGOs, less than 1 crore in annual income, and we hear them, we hear their pains in terms of saying that we don't know how to approach a CSR donor. We've written so many emails, we don't get responses, what's going on? Okay, so that's one side of the story. And then we talk to donors, we talk to people like an Aman, we talk to, those on the panel here to understand their constraints and challenges in not being able to respond. Okay, so the point is, I think what happens is that because this dialogue is broken, there's a lot of mistrust that gets created. You're forming impressions that, हाँ ये corporates तो ऐसे ही हैं, they're not going to reply, नहीं होने वाला, you need to know somebody, you need to know, a way to kind of get through, and we're not going to be able to do it. Whereas on the other side, there's a narrative that corporates would have around, the non-profits in terms of their capacities, their capabilities, their pitches, their approaches, are not able to kind of meet the standards, right? So my point is, how do you bridge this gap? And so a big part of what we try to do, and that's one of the solutions, I don't think it's the only one, is to enable capacity building, right? Is to actually enable non-profits to build the hygiene, the basics. If you're not even doing that, there is no question of a partnership, okay? So you can do a lot of the trust building and everything once you get through. I mean, there are hurdles, right? So hurdle 1 is credibility, compliances. Hurdle 2 is capability to then keep that going, communicate proactively, show professionalism. How do you do that? Because you are dealing with a corporate, and the two worlds are different. So if you want a marriage, both sides are going to have to walk a little bit of a distance. Corporates are going to have to understand that it's difficult for non-profits to make effective 30-second pitches because that's not who they are, that's not their capability set. And non-profits need to understand that corporates operate, their world is different, their world is of data, of reporting, of people coming from very professional backgrounds. You have got to be able to speak a little bit of that language, right? So I think this middle ground is really what's going to enable trust building to happen, if it is to happen, right? So, and dialogue, conversation is the way to do it. So platforms like this, open discussions, respectful places where NGOs can present their challenges, where donors can present their perspective are important for both sides to understand each other and to really build something together.
Thank you. I think that's a takeaway for Bhomik. Yeah, so we are just closing it. So I think that's a takeaway for Bhomik and CSR box, that they should have this.
Can we have 2 questions? Because I
more
think
often.
many people will be interested.
I think we will go for someone who is like a fresher or just joined the sector, and one very senior folk. Yeah.
Thank you very much. It was very good discussion here. But my submission is that when you are making annual plan, please consider senior citizens, because it is already in the Schedule 7. Please consider this also. This was not so far considered, education, health, all that. But senior citizen quality of life is deteriorating, mental health, physical health, everything is now because the population is increasing. So please keep it. It's an appeal to all of you, all the ventures, all the CSR heads, all your funders. Please take care that in your annual policy, keep the senior citizen area also into view so that we can come with the project to you and meet you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So we have a big roundtable coming up in the next month, sir. And based on that, it's more like a consultative workshop. Based on that, SBI will launch a big program on elderly care. Someone?
So, sir, contrary to the topic, I'm a for-profit startup. So, we manufacture clean cooking devices, the world's most affordable clean cooking device for rural India and Africa. So, my question is to that, like, as NGO has a lot of connections with the foundations, but as a for-profit startup, our main focus happens in the manufacturing or in the research and development and those type of fields. How we should approach the donors or the foundations and to have a project in the rural areas or in our sector?
I think that can be either you are incubated through an incubator, so the incubator can submit a proposal, or some of the corporates also do service contracts. So you can go directly through the for-profit route also, because if that's an area of their need or area of their choice, they will do a service contract with you.
Can
So
I
that,
add to this? See,
yeah, please.
you have to do your search, and whoever corporate is aligned to what you're doing, they are your first target, right? Second is cold meals. No matter what we say, you have to keep doing that, right? Because somewhere that do click, right? Many times I have used that cold meals to reach out to organizations. So you have to do that, but don't expect that we'll revert back. I'm very open and very transparent about it. Cold mails, cold reach out do works. LinkedIn Pekaro, bug us with all your reach outs, but don't expect us to revert back to you. So that is how you can do it. It might click, it might not click, but that's the way, and what Aman has said. So that's the way of doing it, yeah.
So just like marriage, we have to constantly try.
Thank you.